Thank you, everybody, for being here. I think maybe could we do one quick exercise? It might require pausing with our lunch for just a second. I'd love to start just with a minute of little mindfulness. So if we want to get comfortable in our chair here, we can, sit however you feel like would support stillness and some solidity. You can open or close your eyes. That's up to you. And let's take a moment and just arrive right here in our body, in the present moment. And let's turn our attention to our breath. Breath is ever present. We don't have to control it. You can just witness it coming and going. A lot of busy distractions from the day, long to-do lists, people to call, chores to complete. You can put that all aside for the next hour while we sit together. With every breath, we feel just a little bit calmer, a little bit more settled. I often think of the visualization of a cup of water filled with dirt. And when we're running around, that dirt gets kicked up and water becomes muddy. But as we sit and we're still for a moment, the sediment starts to settle to the bottom. The clarity emerges. As we close this just a little minute of mindfulness, I want you to call to mind somebody or something that you're grateful for. It could be little or big, a love of your life or a kindness from a stranger today. Whenever you're ready, you can bring your attention back to the room. Thank you. Hi, guys. This is joining us. For those who just showed up, there's some delightful sandwiches over there in the corner. The rest of us were helping ourselves too, so strongly encourage you. Big fan of eating while we talk. My name's Anthony Cernera. I am a therapist. I'm a trauma therapist at Lift Well, which is a outpatient, individual, family psychotherapy practice in Westport, Connecticut. Got about 35 of us clinicians working everywhere from just regular outpatient, see somebody once a week, to we have an intensive outpatient and a partial hospitalization program for people who are in real distress. So we sort of have the full range of care that tries to keep people integrated in their home and their life. And I'm here because I have a master's in education, a master's in clinical mental health care. I'm trained in trauma and grief work. I was a hospice volunteer for 12 years. It's part of what led me to the second career in counseling. Currently a doctoral candidate, about to finish up a PhD where I study specifically habit formation for new meditators. It's a way of supporting people's health and wellness. But most importantly, I'm here today because I'm a human being. And like everyone in this room, I've had the great privilege of loving people and the heartbreak of losing people I care about. I wanted to start just, I'm a practicing Zen Buddhist. I trained in the Zen Buddhist monastery for 5 years back in the aughts. And was really moved by a pretty famous Buddhist story of a woman who became a nun eventually. But when she first encountered the Buddha 2,500 years ago, Kisa had lost her only son, a small child at the time. She went from neighbor house to neighbor house, begging for some kind of medicine or a miracle that could save her only child. And the neighbors thought she had maybe gone a little crazy in her grief. And somebody finally recommended that she goes and sees this wise teacher, the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. And Kisa showed up and the Buddha said, yes, I can help you, but you need to go to a home and bring back a mustard seed from a family that has not experienced loss. Well, so Kisa is renewed in her quest, and she goes and she starts knocking on the doors of her neighbors, requesting a mustard seed. And yet every door she knocked on, Somebody had lost a sister, a brother, a mother, a son, an uncle, an aunt. There is no life without loss. It is the great unifying truth of our humanity. Going to pair this, talk about grief, since we're already talking about challenging stuff, with a little bit of trauma as well. So we're really going to have the full gamut of cheery topics today. But, I think when I think about grief, I think a lot about my evolving relationship with learning how to grieve and to grieve well. I'm 42 years old. 11 years ago when I was 31, I got divorced from my high school sweetheart. It was a surprise to me at the time. It wasn't my choice. I was heartbroken, to put it mildly. And at that point, I had a very rigorous meditation practice. I had come out of several years of training in a Zen Buddhist monastery. I still had a really rigorous daily practice, 2 to 3 hours every morning. I was working as a meditation instructor in addition to some of my responsibilities at university. And I was actually on a 179-day consecutive streak of meditation. It's the longest streak of day-to-day meditation I've ever had. And because I'm a habit researcher and rather intrigued by these things, consistency and measuring these things are useful. And when my ex-wife announced rather suddenly that she was leaving, I immediately chose not to meditate for the next 6 weeks. I knew what was waiting for me when I got to that meditation cushion. There was going to be tears. There's going to be sadness. There's going to be loss. I didn't want to deal it. I didn't want to feel that. I just wanted to put the blinders on and move on to the next thing in life. I moved, I took a crazy 70-hour-a-week job. I started another master's program. I kind of threw myself into life full barrel, and I just didn't look back. It was about 2 years later that I was reflecting on, it was the anniversary of her announcing that she was leaving. I said to a very dear friend of mine and a mentor, gosh, I'm just starting to realize how screwed up I am over this whole divorce thing. And my friend Jim very gently said to me, I've been waiting for you to catch on. It didn't work. Ignoring my heartbreak didn't make it go away. It calcified. It festered. It disrupted. I tried dating after that. I got into chaotic and not great relationships because I hadn't dealt with the heartache and the wound that was there. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm getting my clinical education. I'm learning to become a counselor as a second career. And I had finally met, after 7 or 8 years of dating, the woman that I was convinced was going to be the next love of my life. The first year was joyful. I moved up to West Hartford to be with her. I changed graduate programs from Fairfield U up to St. Joseph's in West Hartford because I wanted to be there. I was creating a life with this woman. And I was in our crisis and trauma class when I also very suddenly went through a breakup of this relatively new relationship. It was only 2 years old at the time, but was heartbroken all over again. That breakup happened on a Monday night. And on Tuesday, I went to my crisis and trauma class, and we studied Wharton's 4 tasks of grieving. Something I'll come to at bit at length in a moment. But Wharton's 4 tasks of grieving are to accept the loss, to feel the feelings. This is the second step. The third is to connect with people we love who love us. And the fourth is to invest our energies in new creative endeavors. And me still dizzy from, the shock of a second major breakup after having just, 6 months earlier moved my whole life up to be with this woman. I decided I was going to try grieving the way that they were teaching us to help our clients as counselors one day grieve. And I gave myself permission to feel those feelings. I used to have to drive by my ex's house coming off the highway from Fairfield up to West Hartford to go to class. And for this first couple of weeks, I could get a little choked up just thinking about it. I pulled my car over to the side of the road after I drove by and gave myself permission to have a little cry in my car. Don't love crying in front of people. I haven't quite gotten over that, masculine thing yet, but I gave myself to feel some feelings. And I became aware that the problem with grief is it was terrifying. I felt like it was going to swallow me whole and it wouldn't let me back out. But what I learned to do through that process was trust it a little bit. And I could feel these feelings. I could honor the grief. That ultimately, it was a privilege to have loved somebody so much for those 2 years that I would hurt that badly over the loss of that relationship. Something extraordinary happened. Now, granted, it was a 2-year relationship and not my first heartbreak, not a 12-year, marriage, but I got better. In a month, the waves of grief started to subside. I could feel like I was drowning. They would come in bits and pieces, but they would mostly come and then go. And after about 3 months, I could start touching the tender memories and experience the joy and the gratitude for the relationship without that feeling of being lost into grief. I listened to the grief. I honored it. I created space. I welcomed it. I chose to make it my friend. And through that, I got better a whole lot more quickly than I did the divorce a decade earlier. I forget these lessons, though. I'll share sort of an addendum to this story. One of the things I did for my healing coming out of that relationship is I missed the woman, but I kind of got over that loss. But I missed desperately the 2 Bernese mountain dogs that we had adopted together. And so I adopted Toaster, and Toaster was the best therapy dog ever. Bernese mountain dog's just a tender, loving, big teddy bear of a dog, if you've ever met one. Toaster was 16 months old in this April when he died suddenly. He got pneumonia. He, in the course of 24 hours, went from a perfectly fine puppy to on a ventilator with IV antibiotics that couldn't save him. I cried, just gave up this. I think it was my first dog loss. I was a little embarrassed that it was so devastating. I knew people loved their dogs. Yeah. I didn't realize it was so devastating to lose one. And I will tell you, the divorce and the breakup were really painful, but the dog loss was so much worse. And I forgot how to grieve. I immediately went back to my old habits. And after a week, I realized I wasn't picking up my phone anymore because my phone had on my lock screen a picture of Toaster. And there was something about that realization that I was scared even to pick up my phone. That I remembered what a gift it was that I gave myself when Jillian and I had broken up, a few years earlier. And that I needed to grieve Toaster's loss. I needed to honor that. And so I spent the next couple of days, we still have some emotions attached to it, spent the next couple of days crying. And they got a little bit better. And then I could start looking at my picture of Toaster and I could be filled with gratitude for all the clients he sat next to while they were having a hard day, and all the beautiful early morning walks he and I took that just meant the world to me. And now, almost 2 months later, there's still sadness there, right? I loved him. I loved her quite a bit. But there's more joy, and there's room for both. The beautiful thing about gratitude is I think it has a really profound healing quality to it. You can't truly be grateful for your life or where you are today or the things you have or the relationship you have without accepting the whole of everything that came before it. the heartache, the ups and downs, the financial difficulties, the health challenges, all of those things of life. But what gratitude does is for me, it takes that grief and it makes it multidimensional. It's no longer this single point of sadness. It's now got this additional layer as love, joy, all those wonderful memories. And we're complex beings. We can hold two realities at the same time. It can be deeply tragic and heartbreaking. And it can be beautiful, and we can be grateful, and we can appreciate those relationships. We can hold both of those truths at the same time. So I'm not perfect at this. I've gotten better. I forget each time I'm faced with a new hardship that there is a way to grieve. This Warden's 4 Tasks really has proven very beneficial for me in my own personal life, but then as a counselor, as I work with people who are experiencing their loss and their grief too. So many of us, I think, are stuck on this feeling the feelings part. I think the acceptance piece comes more naturally for most of us. Not everybody. Sometimes, I think especially with sudden loss. I had 2 uncles. My father lost both of his brothers. They were both in their 60s. They died very close to each other. The one had colon cancer. He was given a year to live, and both mercifully and not, as is the way with cancer, he lived for 9 years, which was a blessing. We had him for a whole, much longer than we thought we would. But it also meant the end was pretty horrific. And so we knew his death was imminent for a while. And shortly, just a few weeks before he died, my father's other brother died of a sudden heart attack. On Thanksgiving Day, he died, got up that morning, wasn't feeling great, fell over, was dead before he hit the ground. That loss felt like a bomb went off. The grieving was sharp and painful for both uncles. And I just felt so terribly for my cousins, all of whom were younger than me, having lost their fathers. But the acceptance was tough with the uncle who died of the heart attack, right? This guy who was just coaching his youth basketball team the night before, who had sat next to at a baptism the Sunday previous, suddenly just wasn't there anymore. Unexpected, out of the blue. And it took a while just even to get my head around. I didn't see this uncle. He was down in the Bronx. I didn't see him frequently. So the first couple of weeks were just remembering that he was actually gone. And so that acceptance piece, accepting his loss, was hard, having to remind myself. And part of the way that I worked on acceptance with Uncle Phil's dying was I kept checking in on my cousins. And a little reminder every morning. I texted his 2 children, thinking about you. I'm here for you if you need me. I love you. Right? Those things that we do for people we love who are experiencing loss, where we just simply let them know, I can't take your heartache away. And quite frankly, at this point in life, I don't think I would wish heartache away. Right? I know I said this already again, but it really is a truth that I've come to believe very deeply. It is a privilege to have loved enough to be this heartbroken. But what I can do for my loved ones is I can make sure they're not alone, right? Not alone in their grief. My other uncle who passed away, the acceptance was the easy part. It was almost a relief at that point. He was suffering so badly those final days. You're almost praying for freedom from suffering. And I'm sure most of us in this room know what that reality is like. So the acceptance was there. But the grieving part, the actually feeling the feelings, was the tough one for me. There's no way around this stuff. I think that's the message here, right? It's waiting for us. There is no time for our soul and for our heart, right? It doesn't know that the death was 2 weeks ago or 2 years or 20 years ago. It just knows the absence of a loved one. And so as long as we don't process our grief, it's going to be waiting for us. And I have definitely discovered that waiting grief, that grief that isn't tended to at the moment, takes a lot longer to clear out than the grief that we honor when it shows up. I want to talk a little bit. I want to change gears. I want to talk about trauma. We pair grief and trauma in our academic studies and when we're training young counselors, because much of the process is actually the same. We experience loss as pain. We feel our feelings in our body. This very interesting set of fMRI research that happened about a decade ago. There were some researchers who were intrigued by this fact that, like, it literally feels like when we're experiencing grief and loss that our heart is breaking. The strong, physical sensations that come with it. And when they looked at people who were experiencing sharp pain, which they could either stimulate through rubbing of knuckles on the chest or a fidget toy that would create discomfort in the hand, or if we were asking somebody in that research to remember a painful loss, all of the same neurotransmitters and pathways lit up from physical pain for emotional pain. One of the interesting side effects, this is just a weird little quirk that I have to share because I'm a nerd and I like reading research studies. They discovered that taking Tylenol actually reduces emotional pain in the same way it reduces physical pain. Weird little trick. You're having some heartbreak, take a Tylenol, drink a little bit of water. It'll take the edge off. But again, it's that neurobiology that the fact of the matter is we cannot separate our mind and our body. I think this is one of the most valuable things I got out of my Buddhist training was I really kind of bought into this Western ideal that my mind was this enlightened thing and my body was just this vehicle that moved my mind around and experienced the world. I now see it, the mind-body connection, so differently. I even struggle using the words mind-body connection because even that implies a separateness that I don't see as true anymore. When I think something's funny, I laugh. When something's heartbreaking and sad, I cry. When I have a headache, I get into a bad mood. When I get a massage, my body feels great and my mood is better. You cannot separate feelings from our physical sensation. And I think that's a really helpful point to grab onto from when we talk about healing or a moment when we talk about what we can do to tend to trauma and heartache and grief. So please keep that mind-body connection in mind. I think another thing that really changed for me over recent years is before I got into counseling, I kind of thought there was a little too much made out of like, oh, everything's trauma now. This is great. Everybody's had trauma. My sister was 9 years old when September 11th happened, and she wouldn't live in the city, but she lived in the city 10 years later, and she would say, well, I have trauma because I'm in New York, or I have trauma because of 9/11. And that didn't ring well right with me. I thought that felt like a little self-indulgent. As maybe my take. And she probably shouldn't have picked that example because I'll be honest, I still think that's a little bit of a stretch for what trauma is. But, trauma is any kind of psychic wound that is not healed. And I think there's primarily two categories of traumas. I think when we think about life as a highway, and if that's a journey down that path, a trauma is something that shouldn't be there. It's a speed bump. It's a roadblock. It's something that shouldn't have happened to us that did. And we've got great tools now in therapy for clearing away debris that's in the road that shouldn't be. There's another kind of trauma that I think we talk about less that I've definitely found as a relatively new counselor who does trauma and attachment work. There's also a trauma of not having had key developmental milestones met in our life. And I think of these as potholes, things that should have been there that are not. Being loved and cherished as a child at home, being adequately protected and cared for, having deep and meaningful friendships that enrich your life and, give us all the joy that comes with the privilege of deep friendships. The absence of these things are a trauma. They're a wound. They're an absence. And there we have less in the psychological tradition and probably more in the religious traditions for finding healing for. If you can clear away trauma, we've got EMDR, we've got brain spotting, we've got all these interventions for helping somebody, make sense of and deal with the ugly realities of psychic wounds. But how we re-experience, how we fill the holes of those potholes, how we can experience the love that we should have gotten as children that maybe wasn't there for us when we needed it developmentally. That's something we do in relation with others. Deep friendships, loving partners, beautiful dogs, a relationship with a higher power, a god or gods, whatever the religious tradition. Being in touch with that part of us that is unwoundable, that is pure, that is, for some of us may exist before and after our body is on this planet. Being able to connect with that spiritual part of us and being able to have that part of us nourished by the meaningful people who are in our lives and in the spiritual traditions of our life. Really important way of tending to those attachment wounds, those absences. But the reason I think we clump in trauma and attachment wounds with grief is the grieving process ultimately is something we need to do there as well. I was 20 years old. I was working at a nightclub when I was early in college, and I was leaving late at night, and a car went zipping past me at 80 miles per hour, and about a tenth of a mile down the road crashed into a telephone pole. The boss and I had been driving together. We were first on the scene. There was a young woman who was thrown from the car, and I was with her when she died. It was a trauma. I had all the classic PTSD signals of I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't drive by that spot. It was 6 months of I was really haunted by this tragedy. I finally decided I needed to talk to a therapist. I got lucky. I ended up with a woman who at that point was trained at EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a trauma intervention that I'm now trained in. And it was just good luck that I found her. EMDR was invented in the late 80s, so 2000 it was still not being practiced very widely. I was lucky to meet one of the early adopters of that. And what EMDR does as a healing technique is allows us to put 2 feet in reality. 1 foot safely here where I am today, where I have safety and I have gratitude and comfort in the moment, and 1 foot in the sadness and the heartache. And EMDR facilitates a process of holding both of those truths to exist at the same time. That there can be heartache, there can be loss, that there can be, tragedies. But at the same time, I can have all of the beautiful and important, aspects of self, the parts of me that are caretaker, the parts of me that care for others, the parts of me that are safe, that I can experience those things simultaneously. And there is a grieving process that goes with that too. There's grief. A young woman died tragically in the middle of a January night, right? There was, accepting that reality, which was hard to do, to be able to sit with that, hold just how uncomfortable that was. There was feeling the feelings associated with it. There was the connecting, the not isolating. That was something that I was really doing in the wake of that particular tragedy. I was not connecting with the people who loved me. I kind of locked myself away. I was embarrassed to be as heartbroken as I was over that event. It was just a car accident. I didn't even know her. Why is this so upsetting? I was blaming myself for being as upset as I was. And instead of getting the comfort and the support and that relational healing of being connected to others, I was isolating. That was not helpful. And then that 4th task, that one that wasn't clear to me back then 20 years ago, but that is now the investing in new creative energies. I know I'm skipping around from different stories of loss here, but I'll say I did adopt 2 new puppies. They're in training to become therapy dogs, adorable little Bernese mountain dogs, just like their older brother, who they don't know, Toaster. And I'm investing in them, creating a new chapter. I think there's something really important about this last part of investing in new directions. It takes great courage to love a second time. When I got married, I met my ex when I was 17, and we were in love and inseparable by 18, engaged at 23, and married shortly thereafter. And I didn't think relationships could end. It was kind of easy to kind of pursue that, right? I didn't know what real heartache felt like. I was very proud of myself to be able to enter into that relationship with Jillian a couple of years after my divorce, because I knew how much it could hurt when it ended. But I also knew that the journey was worth it, even though that the heartache was definitely inevitably coming. All relationships end, right? One of the realities I was thinking of when I started dating again was, maybe you go on a couple of dates and it seems exciting at first and your hopes are up, and for whatever reason you split up. That's a little sad. Maybe you start to form a life together and you spend 2 years together like Jillian and I did, and that's devastating. Maybe you get married and you spend the whole of your life together. You found your partner, somebody who completes you. You build a life with, a family, that you create something that was really made life worth living. And then that person dies. And now you've experienced the greatest loss of 40, 50, 60-year relationship, and having that true partner, that soul mate that's no longer with us. We cannot judge our relationships by the fact that they end. We have to judge them by the quality of how we live day to day. And I think if we can own that, if we can hold those two truths, that this will end, that is the promises of life, is that there's an end to love and to life itself and all relationships, but that it is worth it, right? Trying to remember the long form of Tennyson's "It's better to have loved and lost than not to love at all." And then he has some beautiful line, and I should have pulled it up for this, about gratitude for that. But this creating in new energies, that's the courage part. We're meaning makers. We have to do something with that heartache and suffering. There is nothing more tragic than senseless suffering. But there is something really beautiful out of taking suffering and becoming more compassionate, more empathetic, more understanding of others, more connected to people. I think of that story of Kisa going looking for the mustard seeds from door to door. She had an enlightenment experience. Her awakening was of this finiteness of life and this reality that all things that are beautiful do come to an end. And that was her awakening and her entry. She became a very important Buddhist nun. She trained under the Buddha for almost 40 years, went on to teach countless people herself. And she talked about our shared humanity, about recognizing the tenderness and the sacredness of our own grief and the connection that can facilitate amongst others. And when I think about the loss that I've had in my life, the most important way that I invest in new creative energies is I make sure that the people who are grieving in my life know that I care about them, that I love them. I've got a morning ritual now that I've, since my uncles passed away and I started texting my cousins every morning, I finish my morning meditation and prayer for the day. I sit down on my cell phone and there's a number of people. I've got about 11 people that I text every day. And it's because I got the privilege of walking alongside them through their grief, of being able to say, I know what this feels like. I care about you. I'm here for you. I love you. You're not alone, right? And so there's a lot of ways to make meaning and to invest in new energies. You can go off and form a new relationship. You can launch a business venture. You can adopt 2 new beautiful puppies who, speaking of things I should have done, I should have brought pictures, but everybody wants to see it. I have some adorable pictures. It's up later. Or we can walk alongside others who are suffering, and we can be reminded that we have this shared humanity. So I want to talk just 2 parts here. What can we do, and when should we seek help? So this mind-body connection, there's an interesting body of research emerging now, and it started because of physical medicine. I worked in hospital administration for a long time before I got into mental health care. And an old CEO was very fond of saying that if every American used their seatbelt in the car, ate their servings of fruits and vegetables, quit smoking, drank alcohol at the recommended level of 2 drinks or less a day, and walked at least 7,000 steps, we would eliminate half the healthcare expenditures in this country just from those 5 preventativeness and wellness initiatives. This is very often cited. For about 15 years now, we know this to be true. There's a lot we could be doing in our physical health to promote our wellness that can reduce our need for healthcare. And those are 5 really good places to start. In mental health, we are now coming upon a pretty convincing body of literature that tells us the same thing. If you can cut alcohol entirely out of your life, I think we're discovering that there's actually, unfortunately, sadly enough, no positiveness to putting a toxin into your body every day. If we can eliminate alcohol or at least reduce to healthy amounts, if we can sleep a full night of sleep, and if we can have some amount of physical activity in the course of a day, any one of those 3 interventions alone, not even in combination, any one of those 3 interventions alone has now been thoroughly proven to be more effective at reducing depression and anxiety than SSRIs. Literally getting a good night's sleep is one of the single best things you can do for any mental health, whether it's prevention or treating an existing physical exercise. Incredibly strong second. Won't go too off into the, well, actually, maybe I'll just briefly speak about this. Why is grief and trauma so destructive in our life? It is not just because we deserve better than to walk around with a bunch of heartache and misery, and that we deserve to be able to be happy with our life and to be able to enjoy it. There's physical consequences, physical health to prolonged exposure to trauma and grief. It primarily, I'm way oversimplifying and leaving important details out, primarily comes down to the hormone cortisol. We all release cortisol through the course of the day. It's a healthy part of our neurobiology. But in prolonged excessive exposure, cortisol leads to heart attacks, cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, stroke. Cortisol for long, unchecked periods of time in the body is very destructive. It degrades. You can literally track somebody's increased cortisol levels, and you can watch over the course of weeks their IQ fall. Makes us dumber and shortens our life. We used to call it the CEO's disease, stress, these high pressure jobs that lead to heartaches and heart attacks and stroke early in life. Cortisol is singularly most best controlled through less alcohol, better sleep, and physical exercise. Women produce testosterone at different levels, but just as much as men do. The single best way to counter cortisol is to increase testosterone, and we do that. We produce testosterone, through most of the muscles in our body, but in particular the large leg muscles. So walking up and down a flight of stairs, going for a rigorous walk that includes some hills, anything that gets the large leg muscles moving will produce testosterone, will reduce cortisol. Those 2 hormones cannot exist at the same time. They're biomechanisms that happen in opposition to each other. So when cortisol goes up, testosterone goes down. Testosterone goes up, cortisol goes down. So one of the first recommendations for any of us going through grief or loss or recovering from trauma, try to sleep better. try to really make that dedicated time. Take naps if you need to. Try to be physically active. Move in whatever way that your body is healthy for your body. That can create some of those feel-good endorphins and can get more testosterone in your life. Be connected to our friends and family, right? We talked a lot about accepting grief and feeling the feelings and making friends with something that's uncomfortable. But the being loved and loving others is a really important part of the healing journey. I'm sure anybody who's picked up a newspaper in the last 5 years has heard the loneliness epidemic amongst men. It is particularly acute amongst men, but women have a shortage of connections too. We are tribal species. We are meant to be in connection and communion with others. In there is safety. In there is reward. And for a lot of us, it's meaning and purpose. I think a lot of us, I'll tell you, is 12 years as a hospice volunteer. I never once sat with somebody who's at the end of their life and was thinking about like, gosh, I wish I worked more, accomplished more work, or I wish I was, no, they talk about their friends, their family, their loved ones, their kids, right? These relationships tend to be the most meaningful thing. So when we're experiencing loss, connecting with people who we love, who love us is really important. I think meditation is an incredibly powerful tool for all of this work. Meditation is waking up to our life in the present moment and experiencing it fully. I think there's some myths out there about what meditation is. There's this like idea that I somehow should be experiencing a thoughtless state. And when I meditate, I should be transformed and transported into a blissful, perfect, serene environment. As somebody who has spent countless thousands and thousands of hours and been on dozens of week-long meditation retreats, I can tell you, healthy minds don't stop thinking. The heat, I not sleeping well at night. I'm in an old apartment and the air conditioning is not meant for 90 degrees weather. And so I slept kind of crummy last night. So when I was meditating this morning, I was cranky. My head hurt. I was tired. And so what kind of meditation did I have this morning? I had cranky, headaching, tired meditation. But what my meditation practice has allowed me to do is to become comfortable being uncomfortable. What do I do when I meditate and I'm cranky? You just witness it. Sit with it. I make friends with it. I welcome it. I don't add this secondary, unnecessary piece of suffering, which is wishing I wasn't suffering. Okay, I'm suffering. I don't like it. Scandinavian, I'm meant for the winter. It'll get cold again. We'll be complaining about when I give this talk in 6 months, I'll be complaining about the bitter cold in the winter. I'm good at the complaint. Meditation really helps us learn how to witness what we're experiencing more clearly. And at the same time, somehow increasing that intimacy gives us a little separation from it at the same time. It's this weird contradiction that happens with meditation. I just want to talk about meditation briefly because I think this is the most valuable skill set I can offer for any human being, regardless of if you're in a grief process or not. I like to think about meditation as 4 R's. I sit still. I focus my attention on the experience of the breath. It's easy because the breath is always there. It's kind of got this like soothing quality to it. And it's starting to get me connected to my body in a way that gets me out of this separation of mind and body. It kind of roots me in my physical being. Yeah. Breath happens in this moment. It's a great anchor for exactly that reason. And I also don't need to like conjure up complicated math or remember long sutras or verses of, prayer, mantras or anything like that. Breathing is it's just there. I don't need to think about it very much or even do it when I'm asleep. So I pay attention to my breath and I think of 4 R's. I recognize when I get distracted. I release that thought by returning to the experience of the breath. So I recognize when I'm distracted. I don't judge myself. Healthy brains think. In the same way that eyes see and ears hear, brains think. It's job. It's not going to stop. I have been on retreats where I've meditated from 4 a.m. to 9 o'clock at night. I never experienced something that was like thoughtlessness, empty state. I've experienced stillness. I've experienced silence. I've experienced great tranquility and depths of being calm and connected. But I've never experienced a thoughtless state. So I recognize thinking. I don't judge myself for it. I release that thought by returning to the experience of the breath. And I think this is a really important emphasis here. You can't stop thinking about something by just wishing you'd stop thinking about it. This is that whole old, don't think of the pink elephant, right? Now we're all thinking about Dumbo and the pink elephant, right? We can release a thought by returning our experience and our focus somewhere and immersing ourselves in it. And the reason I love this as a practice of daily life is it gives us a very unique tool set. I think most of us feel swept away by emotions and our thoughts in our day-to-day life. We feel like we're just kind of along for the ride. This ability to recognize a thought and to choose if I'm going to stay with this or if I'm going to place my attention somewhere else, it gives us great emotional liberation and freedom. We can see ourselves more clearly and we can decide, is this a helpful thought? No, I've been anxious about this. The talk with the wonderful people at the Y is coming up. I've thought about this enough. I've got my talk outlined. I can put this down now and I can bring my attention back to where I am. I really cherish the time with my mother. She's twice a cancer survivor. She's in her 70s. We get dog walks in together. I really value that time. My mother and I are like two peas in a pod. Like, we get so excited, we start talking over each other because we just have so much to say. Get so engaged in the conversation. This meditation practice has really allowed me to see when I'm getting caught up in wanting to respond and sort of getting excited about the conversation. I can release my thought. I can return to being fully present, and I can experience the preciousness that is this chance to be with my mom, get to enjoy this time with her. So this ability to recognize thoughts, release thoughts, and return is really valuable. The fourth R is the most important R. So recognize, release, return is repeat this over and over. It doesn't stop. My meditation practice when I'm sitting for 2 minutes or I'm sitting for 20 minutes is to over and over again, gently, with no criticism or judgment, to recognize distractions, to release them and return. So can we practice that together? Can we just do 2 minutes of a little silent meditation? Just sit however you're comfortable. I like kind of balancing a little. I want to be a little upright because I don't want to, when I slouch a lot. So like if I'm putting pressure on my chest, it can restrict breathing a little. So I try to sit upright. I find physical stillness to be really helpful for creating mental stillness because of that mind-body connection. So I try to place my hands somewhere that I think they can rest easily to think about them. Try to let go of fidgeting. I usually take a quick moment to just check in with my body. Is there tightness around my scalp? Am I clenching my jaw or my shoulders up around my ears? Wherever I find tension or discomfort in the body, I just invite those areas to relax, to soften, to be at ease. Then I turn my attention fully and squarely, completely on my breath. It can be at the tip of your nose where cool air rushes in. It can be in the back of your throat as the wind makes its journey down your windpipes. It could be the expansion of your chest or the expansion of your belly if you're feeling really relaxed and settled. There's no right or wrong place to be in contact with the breath. Let's just take a moment, witness breathing, recognize thoughts, release those thoughts, and return to our breath. When you're ready, you can bring your attention back to this form. Any thoughts on meditation? What was that like? Especially curious if anybody's new and hasn't tried a lot of meditation before. Said any time. I used to work with a teacher who would say that, we learn many profound things about ourselves when we're meditating. Sometimes we discover we're chronically sleep deprived and we need a nap. I have learned to give myself permission when I am feeling sleepy and I sit there. And there's, I think, two things going on. Sometimes for many of us who don't meditate regularly, being physically still, the only other time that we do that is when we're preparing to go to sleep. So I think there's sort of something habitual. It kind of triggers in us that says like, oh, it's time to go to sleep. But I think the other thing is most of us don't get enough rest. We're too crazy. Life is too long. It's also for and satisfied energy like they bite. It's pretty hot. It's pretty hot. And isn't that a beautiful thing to be able to say, though, right? We're part of nature. We're affected by it. Gosh, in the winter when it's dark, the darkness, I can deal with the cold, but the dark days, oof, my depression really, spikes. The heat, okay. Need to be gentle with myself. I need to take it a little bit slower. Come to nice places with people like you and sit in a cool room. Thank you. Anybody else new to meditation? What was that like for you?
As Ambus.
Yeah.
Going up.
Very.
Waiting to fill these.
Quiet. Very nice. Good. It's always there for you. You don't have to do it for long. I think there's a lot of talk. There's, in particular in the West, we have a mindfulness-based stress reduction, and the recommendation is 20 minutes twice a day. That is a beautiful aspiration. If you can make 20 minutes twice a day, God bless you. I encourage you. You'll love it. It will change your life. But what changed my life was when I started a 3-minute-a-day practice. And I did that every day it wasn't even 3 weeks before I realized my whole life transformed. It felt like I could touch that calmness whenever I did it.
Thank you for that. Because that growth that it is a little bit.
I mean, it's just like a beat.
I only got the guide in meditation with the day. And I go right to see if I was saying that I should go the other day. You walk up today, if you nap too long with the sign of heart disease, well, I'm like, God, you should have been. So fortunate that I have that little stool where I can do like activity and I right each of that where I had adults in. That's all right. Life story and self practice. Well, I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
We need 3 more.
You only need 3 minutes. And I think part of, just to underpin that, this is about waking up to our life, and it's about learning how to be present. And it's a skill set that, yes, there can generally be something calming and I think restorative to sitting, but sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes it's a little aggravating. My clients who are very deep into high anxiety or have full-blown panic attacks, I actually don't recommend meditation. Because if you're really like in the midst of like full-blown anxiety, the last thing you need is your nose rubbed in a little bit closer. Look how anxious you are. Like, oh, I'm anxious. I know that already. Right? Sometimes we can do some calming, like breathing exercises can help regulate the nervous system and help bring us down. But I think there is this thought that like to be meditating correctly, we're supposed to get some like grand, blissful place. It's a skill set. I want to be able to work with my mind differently. I want to be able to see what I'm thinking and feeling more clearly. I want to be able to choose which thoughts I'm engaging in. And I want to be able to be comfortable being uncomfortable for a little while so that when I have feelings that need to be listened to and honored, it can create the space for that. And so you don't need much more than 2, 3, 4 minutes in a day with some regularity. And I'll tell you just, if that, I sat light that I should have been able to go through a green light, the intersection when I was coming up here from Fairfield. And I was like, I was a little frustrated for a split moment. And I was like, hey, I'm sitting here, I'm in the air conditioning, beautiful blue sky out there, got all this, lush greenery. Like, I can just take this moment instead of being frustrated. I can take this extra 2 minutes I'm sitting at the light to just get in touch with some gratitude, get in touch with my breath. So, these little micro exposures of touching some of that calmness be really valuable, of course, for a day. So thank you. Anybody have a meditation practice? Anybody been meditating for a while? Yeah. Any thoughts or reflections that you want to share based on your experience?
Yeah, I would say for me, what it does,
Great.
being present, or not just when I meditate, but when I just doing my job. I think it's really to get from that point to less, like I call it, this, I'm expecting you can get all those things done of it. But it's harder even if you're all friends and about it. So for me, I would say that's the biggest thing. It just keeps me more in the present. So I deal with whether it's presenting and foundational.
I love that. Thank you. I have a friend who talks a lot about depression is in the past, anxiety is in the future, and right here is where he wants to be in the present moment. This is where safety and comfort is. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Well, it's funny that you said that already. I did try to then take resent up and I'm sure the lab. Have a history of it. Here, it's more gone. And and it's fine, but like that anxiety stuff.
Oh, yeah. Anxiety is a stubborn one. I think when we've really got it in spades, we need all of the tools. We need therapy. We need religious and spiritual support. We need friendship. We need sleep. We need exercise. Sometimes we need medical intervention. Actually, this will be a good segue for my last point. But yeah, stress is a stubborn one.
Empathy.
Well, I've become a big fan of therapy, so I'll sing its praises. But to the point earlier from our friend here, I gave you a particular meditation technique that I think is easy and we can put on a bumper sticker and can benefit you. And I used to be part of a meditation group where we were trying to build it in like an encyclopedia of all that. We gave up after we had over 100 different types of meditation. Every religious tradition has one. There's a billion in the wellness communities. The kind of meditation that is important to do is the kind that works for you. And I think for anxiety in particular, sometimes guided meditations are more valuable than silent meditations. Sometimes we just need that guide. We need that comfort. We need some of that outside influence, a little bit of a healthy distraction. And then for others of us, we need the stillness and we need to learn like the quietness. We need to shut things down and quiet things down a little bit. There's no right answer. There's only the answer that works for us and starts to bring some relief.
That's my food. That's so true. 8 years ago, going to having kids, I needed the space to want to do it. Now I could hear this highly happy courage because I did something for me.
I love it. That is good. Especially after so many years putting others first, right?
I grew up in many cases where all these had good going. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the last point I'll make before I open it up for questions, and I talked a little bit longer than I meant to, so I'll try to keep this part quick. When to seek professional help. There's no wrong time to talk to somebody, I think. And I think there's a lot of venues for that. There's life coaches, there's spiritual teachers, there's priests and rabbis and everybody in between. There's deep wisdom traditions from our 12-step traditions to support groups and grief groups and everywhere in between. This, as I said at the beginning, I think my clinical training is valuable, but I think our human experience is, deep and broad, and there's a lot of places to come in contact with that. I think when we think about when do we need a clinician as opposed to a mental health clinician, as opposed to a spiritual counselor or a good friend or a family member or an adorable Bernese mountain dog, when we stop being able to live the life that we would like to because of the grief or the trauma, there's this kind of rule of thumb. We don't diagnose things. We have an acute stress disorder for people who are more than 4 weeks out, but so between 1 month and 3 months of something devastating happening, we give it an adjustment disorder, this acute stress disorder. But we're just sort of recognizing that PTSD, any of the grief disorders, any of the prolonged grief, we really use the clinical marker of 3 months. You cannot have something really awful happen or heartbreaking or tragic and not take some period of time to adjust. If a spouse dies, I don't think a reasonable person expects you to not, be operating at 100% 2 months out after such a loss. If we're 6 months out from the loss of a loved one and we're having trouble getting to work, if we're not feeling like we can socialize the way we'd like to, if we're feeling as if it was still the first 4 weeks of a major loss, that's when we really clinically are saying, like, okay, we're stuck here in a way that a natural healing and grieving process is going to happen on, so that we might need some clinical intervention. So I'd give just the heuristic of, if we're suffering, we're really still in pretty extreme suffering after 3 months, we might want to look at grief or trauma work. And the second we really start feeling like that grief or that trauma is impacting our ability to socialize, to work, to be healthy, those are good indicators for when we need professional help. So I think I used up my hour, but I do want to, if anybody needs to go, I certainly want to let you sneak out. There's still more food that you can help yourself to. But I also did want to just open it up in case there were any questions.
What is that? So I looked it up at a little used to been like set in similar reason, but kind of back.
So somatic work would be body work is in the most broad way possible. And then there are a lot of different somatic techniques and sort of schools of thought as well. So I'm not too familiar with Reiki directly. Is there some somatic work that works with energy the way that Reiki does? I'm sure there is. I mean, really, we've been very slow in clinical psychology. Everything that Freud was doing in the late 1800s was somatic. He literally started his psychological exams with a physical exam because we store stress and anxiety in our body. I didn't go on too long. Usually when I give this talk, I do it with a colleague who has a whole PowerPoint on stress and trauma and grief and how it shows up in our body. I talk too much about my own grief to have gotten into any of that. Sure. So somatic work is anything that allows us to kind of tend to ourselves. So there's, very much in vogue right now is polyvagal work, which really understands both the importance of calming techniques, breathing techniques, sort of physical. They work with pressure points and actually, puncture points and kind of self-stimulating those and tapping. But they also recognize in polyvagal the importance of doing this work in connection with others, that the best way that we regulate, see our parasympathetic nervous system kick in, is when we're in the safety and connection with other people. So somatic work would be any kind of body work. It could be yoga, Tai Chi. I had a Qigong practice for a while, which was really my first experience of working with feeling the feelings in my body and kind of recognizing there was an energy to that and that I could influence that through movement. But somatic work can be massage. It can be curling up in a blanket and having a lovely cup of tea that smells beautiful and tastes good. It is warm and comforting. So somatic would be soma, anything related to the body. And I think that it is as wide. I get on the Stairmaster, and I think of that as somatic work. I'm breathing heavy and I'm sweating and I'm getting all the endorphins. And I feel like that is as much somatic work as my yoga practice or anything in between. So broad topic, broad area. Any questions or thoughts, reflections? Okay. If anybody I actually don't have any business cards, but if anybody would like to take my cell phone number. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I give my cell phone number to everybody. And I offer this for two reasons. One, please think of me as a resource if you have a family member or a friend who's in any kind of crisis. We offer a lot of services at Lyft, but quite frankly, probably 60 or 70% of people who come to me as a family member or friend who's worried about somebody, we end up not having the right specialty. So I've got great connections in Fairfield County that, pretty much think of me as a resource. Happy to connect with. The second reason I'll put this out here, my cell phone. I do some work with a nonprofit called Everwell Mental Health. They're committed to improving the mental health of every Connecticut resident. They do that through a number of things, advocacy, policy change. But specifically, the work I do with them is a suicide prevention program. There is a process out there is a bystander training. It's called QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer. Is meant for the general population, is meant for parents and teachers and coaches and anybody who comes in contact with people who, if you're wondering, gosh, I might be worried about somebody. I'm not sure if they're at risk of suicide, but I don't know what to do. This hour-long training that is free. I offer this. I try to do it at least once a month. If you ever have a PTA or a school board or a church community or the Y.
So you want one?
So you have a QPR? Great. It's a really empowering training to go through if you're worried about somebody to know how to ask that question. So if you come up and grab me if you'd like my cell phone. Thank you. Okay.
It's called steady. So this is like invaluable to do it.